Okay, perfect. Look, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. And as Councillor Moriarty and Brian said, look, the purposes of this evening's consultation is in relation to the LEADER programme for the next number of years in relation to the development of the LEADER Local Development Strategy. And these consultation sessions will also form part of the basis for our local economic and community plan, which is also underway this year. And we will be back to you in due course again with further public consultation in relation to the local economic and community plan. As Councillor Moriarty said, all the information is on the Kerry Coco website or kerry.ie for people that want to do it as Gaeilge. There's also online surveys, which we would very much encourage people to carry out and input their information into those. And it will also give details of the upcoming consultations as well. So look, I'll fly through a few slides at the start and I'll ask Marc Coleman to come in then to do the rest of the presentation. So look, many in the call will be very familiar with the county and very familiar with the different statistics, but I just think it was important to put them into Kerry at a glance at a high level. What are we like as a county? We'll go through the local development strategy overview, the principles and themes that form the local development strategy, and then the local economic and community plan, just basically a high level summary of what that entails. So when we look at Kerry as a county, we have a population in the region of 155,000, 65 based on the old statistics. And I suppose, as many of you would be aware, we've had a large influx of new arrivals into our communities, in particular over the last 12 months. 65% of the population are aged between 15 and 65. We've a number of third level institutions in the county, and it's been brilliant that we're now a university county. And I see some of my colleagues from the MTU on the call as well. So the Munster Technological University, critical for the county, and also the Kerry ETB, who carry out vast ranges of training programs ranging from apprenticeships to degree programs to master's levels to PhDs across the two institutions, and it's fantastic that we have them in the county. I suppose Kerry people in general are very enterprising. About 1 in 10 people in the county are self-employed, and a vast majority of those are in smaller businesses. We've over 70 science, technology and engineering companies, and we also have the Kerry SciTech Industry Cluster, which is represents many of those organisations, and they do a lot of great work in the county. We've 10 enterprise co-working hubs and an agri-tech centre of excellence, and that would not have been possible without the agencies, people in the local communities coming together and forming some of those hubs. So I suppose we've had the Tom Crean Centre in the MTU with many years at this stage. We've the Killarney Technology Innovation Centre, and we've had new hubs like the RDI hub, which is based in Killorglin, public-private partnership of FEXCO, the Munster Technological University and Kerry County Council. We've smaller hubs throughout the county in places like Sneem and Dingle, and all the hubs are adjusting to what the needs are in their local community. We also have broadband connection points, and Brian, my colleague, is on the call here, was responsible for working with many of you in the communities to develop those. And again, it's about providing high-speed fibre access to people in the county. Look, we're a tourism county. We've about 2.3 million visitors annually, and that brings both opportunities and challenges for the county as well. It's a strong economic driver in the county. About 1 in 5 people work in tourism and related services here in Kerry. I suppose connectivity is huge and very important. So the importance of Kerry Airport, our rail links, our bus links, our road network, and even over the last number of days, you'd have seen new announcements about new services in relation to our local link bus services, and also coming down the line, there will be electric vehicles based in the Dingle Peninsula as a pilot as well. So look, fantastic opportunities there. I mentioned the broadband connectivity, and look, I suppose the National Broadband Plan, there's still challenges in the county, but there has been successful rollout over the last number of years as well. Our county is very rural, so 65% of our population is rural with 35% urban. Now that's different to many other counties when it actually would be the reverse of that. And about 18% of the national wind energy in Kerry is produced here in Kerry. We're the 5th largest county in Ireland. We've about 20% of the Wild Atlantic Way. We've 2 Gaeltacht areas, Ibrahag and the Corcagwina, which are very much part of our fabric and very important. We've coastal infrastructure that, you know, you're looking at areas like harbours, ports, piers and slipways. We've 5th longest coastline in Ireland, and we've also the 6th largest non-national road network that obviously needs to be maintained and developed in the county as well. I suppose the importance of strategic routes linking into the county, the recently opened Macroom bypass coming in towards Ballyvourna eventually will be critical for the county to get access in and out of the county in a more efficient manner. The Adair bypass on the other side, again, great to see that project being developed over time. So I said we've about 156,000 people in the county. It's up 6% on April 2016. We've an older county. The average age in the county is about 41.5 versus 38.8 nationally. 19% are aged over 65 versus 15% on a national basis. And that again brings challenges and opportunities for the county as well. 40% can speak Irish and 2% do on a daily basis. And again, we've seen about 10% rise in employment between 2016 and 2022 versus about 16% rise in employment as a national average. Again, based on the April 22 statistics, about 25% work from home versus 13% of the national average. Now, we've seen lots of people come back into the county over the last number of years and begin to work more from home. But again, we would have expected that maybe to be slightly higher, considering anecdotally how much we heard about people moving back to Kerry during the pandemic. 33% of children are in childcare, and again, that's in line with the national average. 70% own their own home and 24% rent their homes. And again, about 83% said they were in good or very good health. So look, I will let it move on to Marc, and I'll let Brian introduce Marc, and we'll come back at the end then for Q&A. So I'll hand it back over to you, Brian. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bridget. Yeah, Marc is helping the LCDC with the preparation for the LEADER program engagement, and I suppose feeding into the new LECP, the new local economic and community plan. So you know, we're very appreciative to have Marc, who's done a lot of this work across the country. Really, he's got a lot of expertise in relation to developing local development strategies. So we're delighted to have him with us again tonight, and to have his colleagues as well. So Marc, I'll hand it over to you now, and again, just remind people, if they have questions arising from the content of the presentation, type them into the chat or into the Q&A panel, and I'll moderate those and I'll put them to Marc then later on. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Bridget. And it really is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. Kerry is a flagship county, and I'm hugely impressed, as are many others, by the wealth, the richness of civic engagement, and the local expertise that have made such a huge contribution to the county, and very proud to be part of that. My colleague Sean O'Riordan is with me, and also I think Maureen O'Reilly, in case any questions come up in their respective areas of stakeholder engagement and social inclusion. But I'm going to focus on the local development strategy overview and how we can best deliver for the county. Agus mas míon leat raníceacht a dhéanamh as Gaeilge tá is agam go bhfuil gá Gaeltachta áitiúil I géirí agus tá Gaeltacht ar an lína freisin. So mas maithleat raníocht a dhéanamh as Gaeilge déine tá fáilte ród níl me Gaeilge na mógan céad faoin céad ach lean ar ai beidir scríobh síos é. So agus tá cur láthair faoin strátais for áitiúla an tábhachtach don Gaeltacht mar tá gá Gaeltachta an tábhachtach I rathí agus curcagine secunda seo. So tásúla go méid cúpla daoine ar an lína ón Gaeltachta. So just to say, for those of you who didn't understand that this is also a flagship county for the Gaeltacht region, but not everybody who speaks Irish at home is in the Gaeltacht. So if you're one of those people outside the Gaeltacht, please feel free to contribute, but please forgive if my Munster Irish isn't up to it, and in case it's not, just write it down and I'll endeavour to, if not in this presentation, to follow up and respond to any queries. We take the status of the language very seriously. So to go ahead with the Lanimera as Berla. So this is an open and inclusive consultation process, and it's consistent with the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. And what that really means is that after decades of top-down spending of money, Brussels decided over 30 years ago to start a bottom-up approach, and that really took cognizance of the rights of people who've been left behind, I suppose, by the Common Agricultural Policy up to the early 90s, and to develop a leader program that really emphasizes supporting areas and communities that have not previously benefited either from the Common Agricultural Policy up until the early 90s. And since then, every effort is made in successive waves of leader to ensure that people who may have missed out on the previous leaders are brought in. So inclusiveness is the watchword, and bottom-up democratic decision-making is the watchword. We might go to the next slide. Key features are the that, as I've said, it's a plan designed by you through your local area, local action group to support sustainable development of your own community. The local action group coordinates projects and works with local experts. That's very important. Implementation partners and project promoters, they're the real stars of the show. That's designed to make a bottom-up process work. Anyone can participate from a rural community, and it takes a full and comprehensive consideration, not just of local needs, but also local potential. The idea is to address weaknesses and threats facing local communities while exploiting and taking advantage of their strengths and opportunities. It has to be a realistic reflection of how leader funding might best be used. So resources need to be, objectives that are set need to be realistic in terms of the resources that are allocated to them. Don't overpromise and under-deliver. And you need to be mindful, we need to be mindful of ongoing or planned actions of other agencies supporting their area. So there's been a cry from the country for joined up government and for as much complementarity and alignment as possible with EU national, regional and local strategic plans. So we want to move to the next slide on Lahan Shohugan Shinos Gaelge Mas Fiarlate Alev. Just leave it there for a minute so that our Irish language participants can just digest the key points of it. And what I would say is those are the foregoing features. I'll talk in a minute now about the principles and also key signals that we're getting from Europe. We're into a new leader phase, 2023 to 2027, where the prior phase has led Brussels to make a few observations that will be interesting, and I'll come to those in a few minutes. We might go to the next slide now. So the 7 principles of leader are bottom up. We've talked about that. It's area based. So you know your own area. It's based on local partnership. The partnership approach is crucial. And it's as integrated and multi-sectoral as possible. So a good LDS is one that is mindful of and complementary to both local draft development plans of counties, local plans, regional, spatial and economic strategies, and indeed such national policy initiatives in the last couple of years we've seen are the Our Rural Future initiative, and we've seen the Town and Village Centre Recovery. So there's a lot of effort at national policy level to make national policy friendlier to rural and regional growth and well-being. Networking is very important, that local area groups are cooperating with each other, and that there's a good complementarity between a county-wide perspective and a local expert perspective, that's harmonious. Innovation is important. We don't want to be stale. There has been a temptation in the past to, copy paste, but really Brussels is telling us, come up with new ideas and new ways of doing things, and cooperation is really quite similar to networking. So we might go to the next slide. and sin as Gaeilge. Níl gach leathan as Gaeilge gab me leis ní ra an támagan ach tá me géirí an chóstádas an Gaeilge a hispáint don na daoine atá líomh as Gaeilge. Next slide, please. They're the themes of LEADER. They're in Irish and English together. There are 3 themes, and if you're an Irish language speaker, you'll see them at the start. If you're English, you'll see them at the back of each line. So the first is economic and development and job creation. The second is rural infrastructure and social inclusion. And the third is sustainable development of rural environment and climate change mitigation and adaptation. We go to the next slide. And the reason for the community engagement approach is that there's been a lot of concern in not just in Ireland but across Europe about duplicating policies, duplicating each other, waste of money, public money, one hand of government spending money that on an area of policy development that another arm of government is also spending money on. And the general feeling is that by engaging the community and having a bottom-up approach, not only is it more collaborative and democratic, but the government and funding agencies will also pick up a lot of useful information about what's going on and where the resources are really needed to avoid duplication and target resources more where they are most needed. Principles and themes, well, we've spoken a little bit about principles and themes, but this is really about what LEADER was created to do. In terms of principles, are high-level objectives, well, high-level values, if you like, behind the initiative. But we're getting down to the outcomes that we want to see from a good LEADER program. So promoting employment, growth, gender equality, social inclusion, and local development in rural areas, including bioeconomy and sustainable forestry. And you'll see there, those objectives are set out in the Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plan. The vision for LEADER was set out in the same plan, and it's really about supporting rural enterprises and communities, maximizing opportunities represented by the green economy, and embracing diversity of rural communities by involving all members of society in the development process. So go to the next slide, if we would. The Commission is kind of giving us a few hints. It's strongly saying that the partnership principle should be put into practice as much as possible. That means, having as many young people, women, less advantaged groups participating in partnership in the decision-making process. But I suppose it's also making sure that action on the ground at local implementation and project level is as cohesive and dovetailed as possible with what's happening at a county, regional and national level. It's also signaling strongly that it wants innovation in the local context. The way things were done before is not necessarily wrong, but they want to see new, fresh ideas. And the third thing they're telling us is they want smart villages, the smart village approach. And the town and village centre recovery agenda is particularly important now, given the impact that the pandemic had in rural and regional Ireland. There's some differences to note between the current LEADER, which runs from 2023 to 2027, and the previous one, 2014 to 2020. You'll notice a slight gap there in that the previous LEADER was extended for the years 2021 and 2022 as a result of the pandemic. Really, the key differences to note is that the theme 1 is more streamlined. It's economic development and job creation, whereas the previous theme 1 was economic development, enterprise development and job creation. Theme 2 was social inclusion and still is social inclusion, but I think that the strong realization is that rural infrastructure is now of pivotal importance to social inclusion. So it's been added in as a specific and explicit theme or part of theme 2. And then theme 3 has gone from the rural environment to being sustainable development and climate change mitigation and adaptation. And that very much reflects the strong influence of the EU Green New Deal, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which were agreed to the last couple of years, and of course our own climate action legislation. We might go to the next slide if we can. The three themes of the leader are important because the objectives and actions need to align with them. And they've been mentioned before: economic development and job creation. And when you drill down, you'll see that there are sort of sub-theme areas or more refined descriptions of that in terms of the green economy, agricultural diversification, rural tourism and recreation, rural food production, and social and community and cooperative enterprises. The next theme then on the next slide is rural infrastructure and social inclusion. And we're talking about optimizing digital connectivity, accessible services, transport, for example, skills formation and training, rural infrastructure, and services relevant to rural youth training, but also leisure amenities. And then the third theme is sustainable development of rural environment and climate change mitigation and adaptation. So while recognizing that mitigation and adaptation is a cross-cutting issue, and in this context will be considered for all leader interventions, there are a number of specific areas where policymakers feel that leader can contribute, and that's the sustainable development of the rural environment, climate change capacity building in agriculture, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. So that's really saying, as we all know, climate change is a big deal at a national policy level, but there are still parts of the rural and regional application of that are very important from a leader point of view and which complement national efforts. The next slide then is a parallel process is the local and economic and community plan. And I suppose the way I would describe that is that that's the big picture that complements the local it's a sort of the macro plan. It's the major sort of policy insights and plans and ideas that are relevant to the county, whereas the leader really is about implementing projects with specific funding in a more detailed way. The LECP framework runs over a 6-year period. And it basically is it has a 2-year implementation plan, because you can't really see more than 2 years ahead. We've learned that from the pandemic. So 6-year plan, but in 2-year steps along the way. And it basically is also consultative. There's a lot of stakeholder consultation involved. And it's about identifying the current situation and challenges facing the county, and what policies and responses at a macro level should be implemented and then monitored and evaluated. The themes and high-level goals are health and well-being, economic development, and community and local development and climate action. And they are very consistent with the programme for government, which in 2020 very much shifted the emphasis of government policy from just bringing up GDP and getting full employment and the quantitative economic goals which had dominated policy making. There was a realization that it has to be human as well. You can't eat GDP, and employment is not the only goal in town. There are other important aspects of well-being that complement that. So we're now into a public consultation strategy. We're about halfway through, and we've had this is our third meeting. Will be held this evening in Tralee. We've been in Killarney and Cahersiveen last week. We will be in Listowel tomorrow, in Dingle, and in Killorglin over the coming days. And you're very welcome to contribute also online. You can see the kerrycoco.ie website, where anyone in the county can make a contribution. I think that just about wraps it up. I hope I haven't gone too far over time, but thank you for your kind attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.